Hi there, everyone, and thanks for joining us today for part three of our Metrc webinar with Wherefour and Michael McCumber. Today, we're going to be talking about some really exciting topics. On this next slide, we'll go through what each one of those are. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and let Rachel and David take the lead.
Yeah, thanks. So what we're doing is we're partnering up with Wherefour, which handles a lot of manufacturing planning, supply chain. It handles integration with regulatory system and it integrates with financial systems as well as the ability to manage costing for inventory activity. We're pairing up with Wherefour in order to talk about how this migration from BioTrack into Metrc is going to be experienced by our friends in Illinois cannabis. Rachel and I have a lot of experience working in cannabis, working in ERPs, before our cannabis days, working in manufacturing, in medical, in highly regulated industries. And so after close to a decade of doing ERP implementation, and regulatory support for the cannabis industry, we found ourselves in a position to try to help out in navigating this space. In our last session, we went over how Metrc's transaction types are similar and where they differ from those activities in the real world. I went over adjustments and transfers, and you're going to hear some of that transfer experience expressed in today's agenda, where we're going to look at where we are now in this implementation timeline. Cultivation teams started sooner than others. We've been moving into the integrations between Metrc and other integrated systems. Been bringing our data in from other systems, other databases into Metrc. And we're going to start looking at what are the impacts of that work thus far and the new features, the new milestones that we're reaching this week, and how those express themselves in terms of challenges and what are some ways to address them. So we're going to use transfer as one of the vehicles for talking about this, but really the challenges are not just around a transaction. We're really talking about what it's like for organizations to have those different departments and different functions operating in such a way that they're aligned, and how misalignments and missteps in new systems get addressed. So we're looking forward to exploring that. I think the first question, Rach, is what are the new milestones? What are those new milestones that we're reaching this week? What do they look like? And what would users in different departments expect to experience, whether positive or negative, at this new point?
Yeah. So this week, the big milestone was on Monday, June 2nd. And the milestone on that day, or I think it was, anyways, June 2nd, the milestone that day was that every transfer that occurs of product between licenses has to occur in Metrc. So all transfers are now Metrc transfers. No more BioTrack transfers, no more any kind of legacy, anything, everything has to be in Metrc. Transfers like this really represent a move into a new stage for the market. So we're no longer deep into the logistics of trying to get everything retagged, making sure we have access to Metrc, making sure our master data is in Metrc. We really are at a point where most licenses should have already made their at least initial wave of that transition. So they think they have everything in those places, and now they're starting to have to transact real-time activity from labs and transporters through cultivators and infusers all the way to dispensaries. But this is where the rubber meets the road. When you are doing a transfer is when you find all of the little pieces that you forgot, all of the things that you did well, but also all the little pieces you forgot. So when we are looking at this situation, when you go to do a transfer, can you find the tag? Can you find the item? When a new transfer comes in, can you map the item coming in to an item that you already have in Metrc? Do you have to create a new item? all of these little nuanced pieces are really fleshing out stuff that, you thought you got through before. So as operations is moving away from the initial transition and doing this activity inside of Metrc, we want to look and see, what does accuracy look like in the system? So we talked about, do I have the right tag? Can I, break my tag off into a package tag because I can find the original tag to begin with, etc. But beyond that, what is the pieces that might be missing? So if I can do all of these things, but I'm missing a master data piece, or I am missing a vendor or a customer in the system, like I can't find that license anymore in Metrc, or I need to find a COA test result in Metrc to make sure it is connected appropriately to this tag. That is the questions that will start to surface at this point. For operations, it's going to slow things down. So part of this slowing down is just that people are having to do new things. And when we have to do new things, the first month or so, at least, maybe as many as 3 months, are really all just about remembering all the little clicks and all those little pieces that you have to do. So we're starting to see a spike in operational costs, just in terms of people taking longer to do the same thing they did before. They can't get done as much as they used to, et cetera, et cetera. So when these small pieces start to come up, or bigger pieces start to come up that are inaccurate, this really actually exacerbates this already slowed down system, and can start to really create a stressful environment for people. And then that starts to ripple out a little bit further.
So just let me check. So basically, when we're saying, what does that for operations, or any example you want to give, when you're trying to ask what does accuracy look like, that operations team doesn't just look at, hey, I was able to clear my shipping bin here with transactions, but they actually have to be considering things outside of their department. And so that means that accuracy goes slightly beyond what they used to do before. And they're doing it in a new system. And so you're saying that can build up more activity, more overhead, slows things down. People are getting stressed.
Yeah, so people get stressed. It does slow things down. There is starting to be ripple effects that go beyond it. So operations is going to be looking really at two pieces. They're going to be looking at, is it right in Metrc? Is it right in the real world? And do the two of them align with each other? Because at the end of the day, that's really operations kind of core function, is to make sure that those are the things that are lined up, that they are compliant. In other words, it's right in Metrc, and that Metrc represents the real world. So when they want to move 10 pieces, there are 10 pieces to move. Having those two pieces right will allow operations to take the next step, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will allow other company or other departments to take the next step. So what we're starting to see now is this ripple out effect of operations actions and their impact for second and third order consequences. So for example, let's just talk about a transfer, because this is a really easy, it's something that everybody's kind of going through right now. Let's say you make a transfer to another license that is commonly owned by the same company as you. Really, probably the only thing that's going to matter is that you've got the right quantity and you've got the right, matches that physical world and, just that operational kind of two-part piece. Is it right in Metrc? Is it right in the real world? And so let's say that something happens where you trimmed your flour and now you're moving your flour. And so you grab all the flour that there is on this package of Metrc and you transfer just that package over to your other license. And that other license, when they get it in, they go to weigh it and they realize the amount is different because there's been further evaporation. And so it's not as heavy as it was before. There's some moisture loss. So how do we fix that? Finance probably isn't going to care that much how you fix it. They're going to be like, yeah, do an adjustment out for moisture loss. We'll, just make sure it says moisture loss. We'll all be good. We're fine, because it doesn't really have any impact beyond the fact that it moved from one license to another. It isn't changing entities. It isn't changing. It isn't being sold to an external customer. It's not being purchased from an external vendor. So it's not really impacting the financial team all that much. Just, make sure those two operational pieces are right and that you use the right adjustment code when you make your change. So the how you make it is less impactful to other departments. However, taking that exact same situation and having it be that you're selling, let's say you're selling bulk material to a customer, or let's say that you're selling finished goods to a dispensary, and there is an error in a quantity at the point where that goes across. And so I'm going to use a dispensary level one because it's a little bit easier for us all to imagine. Let's say that you packed up a box and the box is supposed to have 24. So when you grab this box, you break off a tag in Metrc for 24 and you put it on the manifest and you send it off to the dispensary. And the dispensary gets it and they open it up. And before they click accept on that manifest, they're going to double check and make sure. So they open it up and there's actually 26 inside because you mispacked at some point in the past. And so there was 26 inside the box instead of 24. The manifest says 24, they can't receive in 26. And so they're wanting to reject the manifest. Now, you might be able to go in and change the manifest and get it right in such a way. There's some things you can do just inside of Metrc alone. So there's a couple of different ways in which how this correction occurs can happen. You could do an adjustment. You could do a revision to the manifest. They could reject the manifest. You could create a new manifest and send it over without physically returning the product. There's a couple of different ways that companies decide to fix this. However, there's a second order consequence in this situation because it's not just the operational of it's right in Metrc and it's right in the real world physically. It's the question of confirming what the AR should be, confirming how much cash should be picked up for a charge on delivery order. There's a lot more to it than simply a change to quantity inside of Metrc to align with the real world. And so the conversation about how that correction occurs is going to be different than that previous use case where it was just between two licenses and it didn't really have any kind of knock-on consequences. Yeah. So this is the point, I believe, in the project we're going to start hearing back from other departments, the finance department, production planning department, supply chain department, sales department, like how many did you send over? Did you send over the right item to our customer? Those kinds of things. And so operations is going to start not only feeling the pressure of doing their work themselves in a new system, et cetera, but they're also going to start feeling the pressure of the feedback from the other departments. Some of this is going to be very direct. The manifest was wrong. You need to update it. You need to send it over to us so we can get the right invoice or the right bill or whatever the case might be. But also some of this is going to then be more forward-looking in terms of what the longer-term implications are for the other departments as well. So if you are in a management position, you have to understand that your teams right now are going to be really starting to have their struggles around the knock-on consequences of this transition, not the immediate consequences of the logistics of tagging, et cetera, but more the consequence of how the data is being kept inside of Metrc. And so that's one of the very first things that we are looking at this week as all of these transfers are happening, is that it's going to start to, to hit other departments besides just the operations department right now.
So then as people are figuring out what does accuracy look like, whether it's, transfers are helping us identify that we have some quantities in the wrong products, and we're fixing that. It also then part of this is how do we make corrections? And so I think that's going to actually be different by department and by which kind of mistake was made. Was it just a quantities mistake? Was there something else? And timing, like when are we identifying this issue? So can you walk us through basically what the correction should think about in terms of serving those other departments? And then give us a couple of examples so that different departments who are watching this can say, okay, I can kind of see what that means for me in terms of finding a problem, knowing what type of solution, and knowing how timing plays a role.
Yeah, so really what we're starting to talk about here is SOPs, because when you start talking about the, who, what, why, when, where, and how, you're talking SOP world. So SOPs, I would assume the SOPs already exist in your company. I'm going to assume that you've actually already made some changes to your SOPs in line with what you learned as you were learning about Metrc and as you were making the changes for operations. But now what we're going to start finding is the other departments needing to be able to provide their feedback on SOPs. So let's go back to the idea of, and just to set the stage for what an SOP is, make sure I've got my glossary of terms here. SOP is standard operating practice. This goes beyond work instructions. I like to always highlight that. Frequently, what we find is a lack of clarity between work instructions and SOP. Work instructions are more along the line of just the how. So when I am making a Metrc manifest in Metrc, I go in and I click this button, and then I enter in this information, and then I click this next button. That's a work instructions. That's how to do this inside of Metrc. The SOP is a standard operating procedure. So it's a procedure. Sometimes people say process, sometimes they say procedure, but it is a procedure that incorporates more than just the work instructions. So it would incorporate work instructions. Work instructions would be a part of it because they would answer the how. But it's going to answer who, it's going to answer why you're doing what you're doing. It's going to answer what equipment you're going to be using for it, what software you're going to be using for it. It's going to answer where the information should happen, when it should happen in terms of a timeline. And then also it's going to be talking about what different people are involved in it. And so really this starts to show the cross-functional nature of these procedures across all of the different departments. So going back again to our use case of I'm selling product to a dispensary. So it is a sale. It's not just a movement between two licenses, and there's a mistake made. So all of your SOPs should not just be the happy path of when everything goes right. They should also be the unhappy path of what do we do when something goes wrong. And the why starts to be really important. Why did it go wrong is going to determine how you're going to fix it, and who all needs to be involved in the fixing. So if it is something, for example, back to the just between two licenses, that SOP is going to be like, yeah, do the adjustment, make sure you use the right code, and that probably is enough because it doesn't impact much more besides operations and the right financial adjustment. But then when we get into this other one where you're selling, it's a much more complex situation because it involves more departments. And so therefore there is going to be more cross-functional needs. So sales needs to know certain things to make sure that they are keeping a good relationship with their client, that they know when the client needs to reorder things, that they keep a good relationship. The client can trust that when they order something, they're going to get what they ordered, and that they're going to be prepared to receive it, and all of those kinds of things. And so sales may have certain requests around if you have to make a change to a manifest, notify us at this point in time. Send it to us, the notification in this format. Do they need a copy of the SOP? I mean, not the SOP, of the manifest. All of those kinds of things should be part of your SOP. It should also be finance. So finance might say, hey, we absolutely need to get a copy of revised manifest immediately so that we can make a change to the invoice and send out a new invoice to the customer, because the customers require that the invoice arrives along with the manifest. And we need to get that fixed really fast. So please notify us because time is of the essence. Again, we really, really think it is very important at this point for everyone in Illinois who is making these kinds of transitions, and honestly, anyone that is making any kind of a change management type of transition in their company, to create your SOPs, have them commonly available, have everybody know to refer to them, and when there is a change in them, make sure you socialize it among all the departments that are impacted. So if you're going to say, hey, we just realized that here's a use case that we hadn't thought of in manifests. When XYZ happens, we're going to do this. This is how we're going to solve it. That change gets written down and gets sent to all the different departments to make sure that they can give their feedback on it now, rather than having to give their feedback at the point of a stressful situation when you're actively trying to solve the problem. So giving people heads up is going to reduce the stress for everyone in this situation, and it will give you a much better SOP. And again, back to that conversation about spiking operational costs, because everybody is kind of getting slowed down by everything taking just a little longer than it used to. Having SOPs that are detailed and complete is really important, because it allows your team members to ground themselves what point in the process they are by looking at the SOP, and be able to catch themselves back up and check to make sure that they're not missing some small detail that might not be as influential to them, but is desperately important to somebody else in the company, whether that's a different department or it's just the next person that's going to touch the product, whatever that is, just to make sure that people can get that support and help that they need to be able to take on quite a lot of new information. I find that it's actually almost harder to make a slight shift in a process than it is to make a massive shift. When there's a massive shift, we think of it as a whole new thing. When there's a slight shift, we have to remember everything's the same except for, and it's very easy to miss that except for and just go back to what you're used to doing.
Yeah, it's not some big change, so it doesn't get the recognition or the face time. So an SOP isn't just going to give us here's how to do stuff, but it's also going to say if you have to unwind something, here's the approach. What if, I mean, SOPs sound like they could be a lot of work, so I'm going to try to make it even tougher. What if what if your problems or your mistakes are compounded? So you pack the wrong item in the wrong case, ship it, someone else receives it and goes to, like, if you've compounded the problems, can SOP help you with unwinding those multiple layers?
Yeah, they absolutely can. So part of this is an assumption that all of your customers, vendors, partners in the marketplace are all going to also have really great practices. But what happens if I send out my 24 piece case to my customer and they're super busy at their store and they just need to, deal with this. And so they just click receive on the manifest. And then later on, they open it up and now they've got too many parts and they're frustrated that it's wrong. And now they're contacting you because they're frustrated that it's wrong. And how do we need to fix this? And so you need to have a really clear understanding in which situation are we going to do a secondary manifest? In which situation are we going to do a customer return? So let's just take again that.
Can we make it that retail is actually someone who's in our team, even though they're a totally different entity, but they're both integral, right?
So let's say it's sister companies, right? So you've got your company that's growing and infusing products, and you've got 2 licenses over there and get to finished goods, and then you've got your company or your dispensary that's under a different entity. So technically it is a sale between 2 companies, but it is internal so that you are able to influence both sides of the process. So your SOP in that situation, you want to make sure that you're handling both sides of the process, of course, and that you understand when it's appropriate. So for example, just as an example, you might say, what is the error? Is the error that there's too much product or too little product? If it is that there is too much product, a secondary manifest will be created for the additional 2 pieces or however many pieces are required and will be sent over to the store so that they can receive it in as well. And that's what we will do. And so that makes it really straightforward because we know what to do now. If it is that there are too few pieces, then the store will do a manifest back to the wholesale license of the extra pieces. So for example, if I said there was 24, but they opened it up and there was only 20 in the box, they're going to return 4. And when we receive in those 4 that we returned, we're going to destroy them because they don't actually exist in the real world. They weren't in the box. The box was a miscount. And so, or a mispack at the time of production, which we've definitely seen happen, and it happens in the real world, humans are humans. And so then we adjust it out. So you now have 2 different processes, completely different set of work instructions that would be used based on a criteria. Is it too many pieces? Is it too little pieces? So this is the kind of thing where SOPs really are across multiple licenses, across multiple entities, sometimes inside of the same company, also across multiple departments. So you've got your retail department, you've got your wholesale department, and then of course also with the finance team who needs to now make adjustments for those intercompany AR and AP invoices on that side. Okay. So that's the kind of thing that we would like to be able to see people being able to take on at this point. We definitely work a lot with companies on SOP creation. And to understand that simply because you can make it correct, the win for operations is that it's correct, compliantly in Metrc and in the physical world, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a win for the whole company. We want to make sure that people's SOPs make it a win for the entire company.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we've talked about in some of the earlier sessions the fact that Metrc really isn't the place where value pieces like cost are going to reside.
Mhm.
So in thinking of second level consequences and thinking of like what is sales, finance going to,
Yeah.
and even like adding one more fun one, thinking about maybe having some systems that are either integrated to try to make it more efficient to have
Mhm.
cost and regulatory posting, or else just where you're doing them kind of like in parallel. You're
Yeah.
managing that side where you say, we
Mhm.
manufactured this quantity at this cost, and then we transferred that in a sale, and then we other side
Yeah.
received that as a purchase. So this is
Mhm.
kind of blending in one more aspect from the financial side. How at least what's going to be the impact
Yeah.
secondarily that is in that scenario?
So let's take a look at that. So there are definitely, and this just to say that this is going to become more and more where we're headed in the next stage transition of this entire transition to Metrc. So I'm going to start with just what that next stage that's coming up is going to be, and that is that other departments are going to start to have to use records, metric-based records, to do their job. So whether that is an end of month inventory account, whether that is a finance team working on costing for the month, whether it is supply chain or production management, trying to figure out, what quantity is coming down the line in terms of the grow that they need to prepare for, so on and so forth. All of the other departments that use the inventory operation teams daily records to do their jobs, all of their work is going to now kind of start. So when we talk about cultivation and we talk about infusers, they've basically almost had almost an entire month inside of Metrc. They were giving access at the end of April to Metrc. They were making the transition early in May to Metrc. And so they've been transacting in Metrc for a while now. So for that side, they may have done their, your May inventory count may have been a Metrc May inventory count, and you may now have sent over those Metrc records to a finance team to do a month-end close, for example. So this is where we're going to start to see a lot of these other teams starting to make their requests because they can see how their world has now changed. So where everything was a little bit more theoretical in the past, discussing what those changes would be, for some companies that really were ahead of the curve, trying to get their finance teams involved earlier, trying to get their supply chain teams involved earlier in terms of what the reporting differences would be. Now that's going to all start to really become, the actual rubber meeting the road, the actual reports, the actual what they actually can and cannot get out of Metrc. If you find that you could use BioTrack really well in this area before, and now you have your other teams, your other departments coming back to you and saying, well, in BioTrack, I had fill in the blank, and I don't here, whether it's a specific stage of product or for example, in cultivation, you only have certain stages, and maybe BioTrack, you had different stages, and teams out there were kind of depending on him. Like a supply chain team said, yeah, as soon as it hits juvenile flowering, I know I do X, Y, Z, and I don't have the juvenile flower stage anymore. Those kinds of things. That's where potentially looking at a third-party solution like Wherefour is really might start to be the discussion that you're having. BioTrack definitely has some ERP light stuff that Metrc doesn't have. So if your teams are starting to find themselves really at a loss in the reporting area, this may be time to look at a third-party solution that integrates with Metrc and that can expand on what Metrc requires to give you that functionality that is needed for other departments. So that is definitely one big part of this. In terms of around dispensaries and around just all of the companies in general, especially with the financial departments, things like cost, et cetera. If you had a system that was giving you perpetual inventory costing, which a lot of cannabis companies really aren't using perpetual inventory costing, Metrc does not do any of that. So either your third-party product needs to integrate well with Metrc, or you might need to look at one that does integrate with well with Metrc to be able to give you that perpetual costing that's accurate, and to make sure that your operational teams are using their processes, whatever changes they felt they needed to make in order to mesh up well with the metric requirements, are still meshing well with the costing requirements as those costing numbers start to come through. If your teams are doing cost accounting on a restatement of costs, and doing it at the end of the month as as a look back, then you really are probably not going to start to hear those complaints until closer to the month end. But we expect that by the end of June, beginning of July, we're going to definitely start to hear feedback from finance teams saying, hey, I'm not going to close the month correctly if I can't get X, Y, Z. So that's kind of being a little bit more on the forward looking side, but it might be something that as you are looking at what changes you're making on your SOPs, as the rubber really is meeting the road, as the transfers are coming through, that you also, when you can, take that opportunity to reach out to your finance team and say, hey, let's try to get ahead of the curve a little bit on this. If we have to make some changes right now anyways, let's see what other changes you might need. Can you kind of start looking at stuff so we can get kind of ahead of this, so we don't have to make a whole nother set of changes come the end of this month after we've just gone through all of the pain we're going through right now.
Yeah. I think that's a key, is the fact that using these systems now is going to have, eventually we know, results for tomorrow around accuracy, around usability. Just
David,
getting
I think
ahead
your
of those.
mic might be breaking up.
Oh, sorry. Is it still bad? The mic's still not working for you, Rich?
It's a little grainy.
Okay. I can try switching mics here in midstream and see how this. Any better? Is that any better? No.
Not really. Sorry.
Okay. Well, yeah, I've tried 2 different mics, so I guess I'll let you wrap it up,
Not
Rachel.
terrible. I can definitely hear you. It's a little grainy.
Okay. Well, what I was going to say is that some of these systems, like Wherefour, will also assist in navigating these changes, both seeing, hey, these products, this inventory isn't accurate, as well as financially, the relationship of that financial activity to the inventory, really helping to streamline those. I think in some future sessions, we might start looking at how systems like Wherefour's, how integrated ERP systems are going to start allowing us to see and avoid those kind of mistakes, because they are literally controlling those postings to Metrc in a way that reconciles to what's already been verified.
Yeah.
Hopefully that came through audibly.
It came through audibly. It's just a little grainy. So I think what's really important is to keep that kind of that bead on what those changes are, what those needs are for your company as all of this is coming together. I think it's also going to really, this kind of plays into next week's big threshold or deadline, which is going to be that starting next Tuesday, everyone is required to only sell Metrc tested finished goods. Now, inside of Metrc, when a lab produces a COA test, they connect it to the tag, the source tag of the product that was sent to them. So you have your tag, you break off a sample tag that you send off to the lab on a manifest. When the lab finishes it, they go into Metrc and they can see the tag that sample tag came from, and they can attach COA results to that. There are softwares out there, such as Wherefour, that allow those Metrc tests to actually come in and show in the compliance section of the software. You can also see them directly inside of Metrc. As the dispensaries are looking towards next week's deadline, they're going to be looking at 2 really big pieces. The first one is, can I sell through everything that I have that is not Metrc tested before next Tuesday? Like, I need to get this product either retested or I need to get it sold through. So I think we'll see that they've really been working on sell through. We may see some sales in dispensaries over the next week, but also we might see some dispensaries reaching out to have product retested, or to see if the original tag that product came from has now been retested at a Metrc lab, and can they get a copy of that test? Like, can they make sure they can get that test connected up to their product? The other part of this, though, is to make sure that as these transfers are going out this week, that and being received in at the dispensaries, that they can see the Metrc test associated with that product inside of Metrc. So making sure that confirmation is happening now gets you ahead of the 8 ball for next week. When that happens with next week, that's when we're going to, I think, start to see a lot more situations around the transfers being product returns, transfers being rejected because there's not a Metrc COA test associated with it. So really making sure that your teams are clear on those test results and can see them and have reporting that shows which products don't have Metrc test results. You know, all of that kind of stuff right now is going to be something you're kind of wanting to get ahead of for next week. And again, there are definitely companies out there. Wherefour is a really great example of a company that gives you some functionality around that to help you to integrate that portion of Metrc into a broader range of reports than Metrc allows. And so that's just something I think that people are going to start having questions about. BioTrack had some functionality there that Metrc doesn't have. Again, one of the biggest parts of all of this is going to be around the reporting. Metrc's reporting is very stripped down. It doesn't mean it's not good reporting. The reporting that it gives has a lot of audit traceability, because that's what Metrc is there for, and that's what Metrc is good for. But it is very limited in terms of what reporting is available, and it definitely does not provide as of reporting. So you want to get what your numbers were as of end of last month. Metrc is not going to be your place for that. So again, looking towards that, that's what we're talking about, is we're looking towards the future, other departments asking questions, supply chain, production planning, finance, sales teams, even strategic leadership. I really think that the reporting side is going to start to rear its ugly head in terms of where there's some need there and some concerns there. So that's kind of what we're looking at for our next time around.
Great. Well,
clear.
If my audio is clear enough. Okay, I went and shut down a whole bunch of windows just to see if that would help out. Apparently it did. So thanks again to Wherefour for letting us have this discussion, and looking forward to exploring a little bit more of what Wherefour is going to do next time in terms of a solution that helps avoid well, not just avoid, but also improve upon some of these cross-functional struggles that almost certainly many people are experiencing. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate you.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.